Hello, dear friends. You are on Ruslan Bailov's channel, and this is our daily review of the situation on the line of combat engagement on the Ukrainian front. Vladimir Zelenskyy, during a conversation with journalists from The Atlantic, stated that he personally prefers not to conclude any peace or conduct any negotiations rather than sign a peace agreement implying, for example, the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the Donbass. Actually, we had no doubts about this. It was obvious that Zelenskyy is interested neither in peace nor in a diplomatic settlement. After all, in the event of peace, the need for elections would arise. And in the current situation, elections can be avoided while remaining the president of Ukraine, all while significant financial flows continue to enter the country. He has settled in quite comfortably, and nothing threatens his personal safety. So why, in that case, does he need any negotiations? Meanwhile, combat operations on the front line do not cease, and we continue to analyze the current situation. So friends, I strongly recommend everyone watching this episode to watch it to the very end, as the information will be extremely important and intense. Today we will try to understand in detail what is actually happening with Syrskyi's offensive operation. Does the Ukrainian army have breakthroughs? Are there real successes? And if they exist, what is their scale? The fact is that extremely little objective information is coming in right now, and the data that exists boils down to statements that the situation is under control, attacks are being repelled, and the enemy is being destroyed in large numbers. It is hard to argue with this, since the armed forces of Ukraine are indeed suffering colossal losses. For example, in just the past 24 hours, they lost another 18 units of armored vehicles and one artillery system. Thus, in total, over the last 4 days, their losses amounted to almost 60 units of equipment, 2 artillery installations, and over 1,000 personnel, killed and wounded. I am citing these figures so that you realize the scale of the ongoing offensive. Have they achieved any success with such expenditures? If we look at our map, the achievements of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, AFU, look minimal, especially considering the volume of invested resources. What do we observe on our map? They were able to retake the urban-type settlement of Ternovate, the settlement of Pridorozhnoye, as well as the greater part of the village of Kosivtsevo. At the same time, for instance, the Telegram channel Von DV, Warrior of the Far East, which is linked to the Vostok group of forces and publishes footage of objective control, claims that Russian forces are still present in Ternovate and Kosivtsevo. Actually, this is what I told you earlier. These territories are a grey zone, and the AFU does not have full control over them. Now let's move on to a detailed analysis of Syrskyi's counter-offensive and what the Ukrainian forces have managed to achieve during this time. As for the northern flank, and I have constantly emphasized that this is the most difficult sector of the front, we see the following here. According to this map, the AFU breakthrough in the sector south of Tikoye amounted to 12 kilometers, and south of Velika Mikhailivka, about 8 kilometers. The map also indicates that during the days of the counter-offensive, the AFU regained control over such villages as Orestopol, Sosnovka, Gai, Alexeyevka, and Stepovoye. However, I will make an important qualification. Not a single frame of objective control has come from any of these settlements that would allow one to state with 100% certainty that the AFU really entered there and controlled these territories. There is not a single verified video or photo, and herein lies the paradox of the current AFU offensive. It is taking place in a mode of total informational silence. The Ukrainian side is not publishing footage, and for obvious reasons, there is none from the Russian side either. Therefore, we are left with the only option, to rely on our own sources directly from the ground. Based on the current information displayed on the map, I can confirm the following. Regarding Orestopol, we have already discussed that the AFU indeed retook it. Regarding the breakthrough of 12 kilometers, no, I do not confirm this. Perhaps at some stage Ukrainian groups did break through there, but one cannot speak of stable control. Let me remind you that on the first day they even reached Uspanovka, which would have meant a breakthrough of 20 kilometers. But what was the point of that? The group that broke through was destroyed, and they did not undertake any more such suicidal attempts. This sector is colored on the map because there was data about the AFU entering Kalinovskoye. However, they were unable to hold positions there, and the entire territory between Verbov and Berezovye is under Russian control. There was also no entry into Ternovoye, only an attempt, just as there was an attempt to enter Berezovye. Both of these attempts ended in failure for the AFU. Russian fighters were able to contain the enemy's onslaught on the defensive lines north of Berezovye and also prevented an AFU breakthrough into the settlement in the area of Ternovoye. As for Sosnovka, honestly speaking, data from the ground varies here. It must be understood that even directly on the front line, they do not always possess full information about what is happening with their neighbors. To the north, south, or west, it is known for sure that the AFU entered there. Later there was information that they failed to gain a foothold. Then reports came in about their activity south of this village, precisely that same assault on Berezovye. Based on their activity to the south, we can conclude that Sosnovka is most likely lost and is under AFU control. But again, keep in mind the fact that there is no footage of objective control. Therefore, one cannot be 100% sure of anything we are discussing. I will tell you this. When I receive information from the guys on the ground, I treat it as data with a high degree of reliability, but not as the absolute truth. 100% information is when you see everything with your own eyes, or see clear, understandable footage of objective control that can be verified. Only then can one speak of full confirmation. Everything else is a probability lower than 100%. Let's move on. Alexievka. Yesterday reports appeared that the AFU retook this village. At the moment, I can neither confirm nor refute this information, as I have not yet received fresh data. Summing up the sector of the AFU offensive in the north, in the zone of responsibility of the Vostok Group, the following can be said. The attacks are very serious. The enemy has certain successes. Of what is reliable, on a fairly wide sector of the front, they advanced 5 to 6 kilometers in depth. Regarding settlements, they retook 2, possibly more, 3 or 4. If we speak about the AFU offensive in the sector to the west, from west to east, the situation here is as follows. They entered Ternovate, and there was corresponding footage of objective control. Russian troops also hardly control Pridorozhnoye. In Kosivtsevo, AFU entries were also recorded on footage of objective control. Russian maps also mark Ternovate, Kosivtsevo, and Pridorozhnoye as a grey zone. Furthermore, it is noted on the map that the AFU retook Dobropolye and Priluki. This can be indirectly confirmed, but with an important nuance. As our artilleryman reported to me, Russian troops never had full control along this highway. Artillery worked regularly and continues to work on this road, as the AFU also attempts to break through from there to Ravnopolye and Sladkoye on a regular basis. Therefore, although on Russian maps this zone was previously colored red, as controlled by the ARF, it can be considered that the AFU retook it. But in fact, the situation there has not changed compared to what it was before. The only difference is that the number of attacks and breakthrough attempts has increased. Thus we have 4 days of the local AFU counteroffensive named after Zelenskyy, 60 units of destroyed equipment, more than 1,000 AFU fighters put out of action, killed or wounded, and the presence of some successes on their part. If we sum up these successes, then of the more or less confirmed, this is 4 retaken settlements. Of the less confirmed, up to 7 settlements. Is this a success? Locally, yes, it is a success. Will they succeed in achieving something more serious? One of the goals they set is reaching the administrative border of the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions along this line. The second task is to retake Guliaipole and push Russian troops back beyond the Yancha River. In my view, both are unlikely. Perhaps the first goal sounds slightly more realistic, but I doubt its realization as well. The second task, in my opinion, is absolutely unfeasible. The 5th day of the active phase of the offensive operation is already underway. It is worth noting that, despite the fact that the intensity of battles and the number of attacks by the enemy are not decreasing, the effectiveness of the armed forces of Ukraine's actions has dropped noticeably compared to the first 2 days of this offensive. In this regard, I express cautious optimism and assess the probability that the enemy will manage to realize all their plans as low. Yes, it is quite possible that they will manage to retake a few more settlements. I urge you to be morally prepared for this. I also want to warn that Russian cartographic resources might at some point update data and paint a large territory under enemy control in a single day. We might be talking about an area of, say, 50 or 60 square kilometers in favor of the Ukrainian side. Do not be scared by this. It will not mean the loss of territories in a single day. It will be the cumulative result for the entire time of the offensive operation, which was simply not applied to the maps in real time, but will be displayed all at once. In general, I repeat, I maintain cautious optimism. I see that while in the first days the enemy showed certain effectiveness, now it has significantly decreased. In my opinion, they will not be able to globally turn the tide, for example, to force the Vostok group of forces to retreat and stop the advance toward Orakov and Zaporizhzhia. Of course, I am just a person analyzing visible facts, and I could be mistaken. In essence, Ukrainian troops are attempting to delay the Russian army before it finally approaches Zaporizhzhia. The fact is that if Russian units reach Orakov and battles begin directly for this city, the Ukrainian army will definitely no longer be able to stop them. Actually, this is an attempt to delay the inevitable, namely the battle for Zaporizhzhia. If Russian troops maintain the current pace of advance, it is quite realistic to expect the start of the battle for this huge city by autumn or early winter. The Ukrainian forces will not have enough resources to hold it, since all of the enemy's logistics will end up under the fire control of the Russian army. Let me remind those who do not know, the greater part of the city of Zaporizhzhia is located on the eastern bank of the Dnieper, and only a few bridges connect the city. If the Russian army approaches these crossings at a distance of 20 kilometers, supplying the city via these bridges will become practically impossible. We will carefully follow the development of events. Now let's move along the map to the Pokrovsk direction. Fresh news is coming from here. I previously reported to you that Russian fighters are engaged in accumulating forces and reserves in the settlements of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. Reserves are being pulled up there, supply is being established, and large-scale offensive actions may begin in the very near future. Russian units are already pushing through the enemy's defense in the area of Grishino. There is information about the expansion of the zone of control, which has not yet received visual confirmation, but reports are coming from authoritative sources. If the Russian military manages to break through the defense of Ukrainian forces in Grishino, then subsequently, according to the domino principle, the following settlements will go as well. A whole network of small villages is located there. These are Vasilyevka, Mirnoye, Gulevo, Shilovka, Yurievka. It is likely in this order that the advance of Russian troops will develop. Reports are already coming in that Russian troops are expanding the zone of control along the railway track and along the E50 highway. The railway and the highway run parallel to each other. Information has repeatedly arrived that Russian units are advancing toward the settlement of Sergeyevka, which is located in this zone, and are increasing the controlled territory. There is also information that Russian troops are expanding the zone of control to the north of the city of Pokrovsk, despite the fact that Ukrainian forces in this sector undertake counterattacks very often. Let us now move to the Krasny Leman direction. Materials have arrived from here confirming advancement in the settlement of Drobyshevo. Yesterday, we discussed that active combat operations are continuing there, and Russian troops are exerting pressure from the direction of the settlement of Dibrova, from the direction of the settlement of Stavky, and in the direction of Lyman itself. Today, video material was received from a specific point. A forward position of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the residential area of Drobyshevo came under fire from Ukrainian forces. This confirms that Russian troops advanced by 1.5 kilometers and occupied new lines in the eastern part of the settlement. Thus, the entire territory marked in red on the map has, as of today, passed under the full control of the Russian army. Video evidence has repeatedly come from here, showing that Russian troops entered practically the center of Drobyshevo. There were positions there were even instances of Russian fighters being taken prisoner, but nevertheless, the greater part of the settlement remained with the enemy. Now, however, Russian troops are systematically pushing through the defense of the Ukrainian military. A similar situation is developing in the area of the settlement of Stavky. For now, there are no visual changes on the map here, But news from this sector of the front is coming in just like from Drobyshevo. The only difference is that for Drobyshevo there is confirming information, while for Stavky there isn't yet. At the same time, information arrived today from another sector of this front. You can see on the map the lines of fortification structures of the Ukrainian army, as well as fortified areas which are marked in yellow. Video material arrived from a point where a forward position of Russian troops east of the city is under enemy fire. This means that the armed forces of the Russian Federation have reached new positions on the Krasny Leman, Stavky line and occupied a stronghold, advancing 3 kilometers in depth. This stronghold, judging by everything, is occupied by Russian troops, and now the clearing of all adjacent lines of fortifications will take place. In the future, we will see that Russian troops will head toward the next stronghold and will also assault it. By all appearances, the front line now looks exactly like this. All this territory is most likely already under the control of the Russian army. Such are the news and changes in this sector for today. Let us move further along the map to the Kupyansk direction. Here, for today, there are no significant changes. Reports are coming in that Russian troops are successfully clearing territories and assaulting enemy positions. However, there is no recorded advancement at the moment. Active combat operations continue in the areas of the settlements of Kucherovka, Kurilovka, Kupyansk Uzlovy, and directly in the city of Kupyansk itself. The city of Kupyansk itself, judging by everything, is divided. Half is under the control of Ukrainian forces, half is under the control of the Russian army. Here, a so-called layering of battle formations is observed. Russian troops first repel enemy attacks, then Ukrainian forces repel attacks by Russian troops. Counterattacks happen here daily. There are even facts of capture of Ukrainian military personnel in this sector. There are video clips and confirming information, but I did not publish or voice them, as it is impossible to accurately geolocate the point where exactly the Ukrainian fighters were taken prisoner. Nevertheless, the fact of capture exists. Judging by everything, Russian troops will now successfully push through the enemy's defense, as the task stands to take Kupyansk before the end of winter. Literally 2 weeks remain until this deadline. I hope that the Russian command in this direction will not start sending fighters into frontal attacks for the sake of meeting deadlines at any cost to take the city in 2 weeks, but will act systematically, clearing territories without haste. This is important, despite the fact that there have already been messages and reports to the president about taking Kupyansk before the end of the winter period. Also, one should not exclude the probability that statements about deadlines might be a public ruse, the goal of which is to force the Ukrainian command to transfer more reserves here to prevent Russian military personnel from taking the city on time and to demonstrate their success. Therefore, we continue to carefully monitor the development of the situation in this sector of the line of combat engagement. Well, that is all I have for today regarding the situation on the front. I hope this episode was useful and informative for you.